Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start this new playlist here, once again based on one of your suggestions. This one though, a past suggestion. I decided to go into the well, dig up some of the older past suggestions, and then talk about it here. This one has been suggested before as well, even further. Only reason I haven't talked about it is because it's too well known. You know me, you know how much I love being able to talk about on the more rarer subjects. But when I was taking just a brief glance at the information involved, I realized I was discovering some new things. So I thought to myself, there's a good chance others might not know some of this information well. So it's good to at least share it here. But absolutely, it is considered one of the most mysterious, fascinating, haunted houses in the United States. You're looking at a picture of it now. Obviously, it's going to be well recognized if you don't recognize it immediately. But internationally, world known, it's the Winchester Mystery House. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with this very, very mysterious house. So here's essentially how this house started. It all goes back to William Wirt Winchester, who was essentially the person associated with Winchester Repeating Arms Company. You've heard those rifles before, right? Winchester's rifles, where they essentially came from him. And at a certain point, he married a woman by the name of Sarah Winchester. She was born in 1840. She grew up in privilege. She was able to speak a good number of languages. She went to a bunch of schools. She obviously married, in this case, William Winchester. So she married into a very rich situation, and they eventually gave birth to a daughter by the name of Annie. But cut to a little bit later, and as it turns out, very tragically, Annie ended up dying, and then about a decade or so after, that's when the husband, William, ended up dying. This was in turn, obviously, very devastating to Sarah, kind of like a 1-2 combo, because she in turn was suddenly facing all these tragic circumstances. And so when that death of William happened in 1881, she became very rich. Obviously, she was rich already, but she formally inherited pretty much most of the assets associated with Winchester Repeating Arms Company. So get this, at the time, she inherited $20 million, which in today's dollars would be over $500 million, and she continued to have 50% of pretty much whatever that Winchester Arms Company was making. So at that time, she was getting about $1,000 a day, which means she was getting about $25,000 plus per day in today's dollar. Can you imagine that? Imagine having that type of income on a daily basis. But even then, even with those riches or those continued riches, Sarah Winchester, though, was still very sad, obviously, with what happened to her husband and, of course, what happened to her daughter. And so because of this depression, she ended up seeking advice of a mysterious medium. This was someone who was apparently able to tell her why things happen and what she could do about it. Now, the name of this medium still remains mysterious to this day. Now, even as far as, where this situation occurred, like the location that she met this medium and so on. But the story goes that this medium advised Sarah Winchester that the reason why this was happening to her, like in terms of the death of her daughter and the death of her husband, was because there were some spirits that were angry at their situation. As it turns out, the Winchester rifles, obviously being used in armed battles throughout the country and probably throughout the world, had caused a lot of deaths. A lot of painful deaths were also a result from those specific rifles. And so because of it, those ghosts, those spirits were haunting her and causing these type of tragic circumstances, and they were going to go after her next. And so the medium advised her to head west. In this case, she was originally living in New Haven, Connecticut, but they advised her to head west to California, kind of like in a quest to be able to confuse spirits, to keep them on the run, so to speak, so that way they couldn't necessarily claim her, while at the same time she could try to do things to appease them or make them as peaceful as possible. And reading this information, it seems like very fantastical, but in a weird way, it kind of makes sense. Like if you would have a vengeful spirit, they would would go after the cause of the whoever had the rifle, or some of them would, and if they were that intelligent, they would be able to find out that it had to do with the Winchesters. And so off she went over to California, and there she was able to purchase a farmhouse at that time, but obviously it was destroyed afterward and completely rebuilt. But that was the start of her next phase in life, because the medium had advised that whenever she built on that farmhouse, she should be able to continuously build and build and build. Just keep on building whatever she's doing there, and then that way it would expand and expand, and this would be almost as a way to not just appease the ghosts that were chasing her, but also confuse them in a weird way. More on that here in a minute. But yes, she immediately started hiring carpenters. They decided to work around the clock. This was something where a teeny tiny house ultimately ended up being a 7-story mansion. I mean, it was just absolutely gigantic. This was 7 stories tall. The logistics of it was 161 different rooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 plus panels of glass. Can you imagine the work that would be when it comes to having each glass separately installed? Not just one, but 2 basements. There were also 3 elevators, and then of course a whole bunch of mishmash of things that to cause confusion. So as I was mentioning a minute ago, apparently the medium was advising, as she was building this house for the ghost, the best way to confuse them, to keep them essentially from, I guess, attacking her or doing something directly to her, was to make things haphazardly, meaning the rooms should have no logistics to them. So a doorway could be built, but it opens up to a wall, or a stairway could be built, but it goes into the ceiling. Or in other cases, windows, like those 10,000 plus windows, could be done, but they face other rooms, and in some cases other walls, and there's nothing going outwards. There's even, I think it was around 10 toilets, 10 restrooms that were built, but only one of them ended up working. She was very specific about that, because apparently Sarah Winchester wanted to make sure that if she was going to be haunted, she didn't want to be in a toilet at the time, which kind of makes sense too, because you don't want to have that kind of stuff happen, obviously, when you're in the restroom. But yeah, she had only one toilet working, and she had so many rooms that she was sleeping in a different room every single night, so that way the ghosts that were keeping track of her would apparently go into the old room, realize she wasn't there, and then somehow wouldn't be able to find her where she was in her next room. But yes, that was the idea of this mansion. There was the notion that if she built it in such a confusing, illogical standard or standpoint, then she would have something as far as these ghosts just looping around, not being able to find where they're going or coming to. And so because of it, it would be almost a way to keep her safe. And then also, she was continuously doing seances within the house. Out of those ghosts that were more sinister, the ones that were trying to get her, she did apparently talk to some of the ghosts that were more of the lighter ones, if you could call it those, the more of the nicer ones. They were there also telling her how to construct things and telling her she should do things certain ways, so that way they could in turn protect her and make those other ghosts, again, get lost. And then also at certain points, and again, some of this is probably not 100% verified, and this is because she remained so mysterious during her life, let alone after her death. But yes, apparently she also consulted Mr. Winchester himself. And at certain points, he was able to tell her, again, how to do certain things, and then make sure that, yes, all of this stuff was being done to protect her and so on. But yes, this home was just continuously built over several years. It was also built out of 100% redwood, but she put in a very expensive things too. I mean, there was gold plating here and there. There was also this faux grain that was installed. Very expensive stuff, like in terms of paint as well. Dale Tiffany was able to construct some interior glass designs, the ones that would go into windows, and those were exclusively just for the house themselves. She spent a lot of money on this house just to make sure, again, that no expenses were spared. and that way she could in turn stay safe. But it's either it worked or it didn't. Again, we don't really know too much about her interactions with any of the ghosts. The house even survived an initial earthquake in 1904. As it turns out, this earthquake could have destroyed the entire house, but it didn't, because she had the wherewithal to include what was called a floating foundation in that area, just to make sure that things could survive. So 3 of the 7 stories ended up going, but the rest of the 4 stayed there. And she had some advanced indoor plumbing, and then also push-button gas lighting as well, including electrical elevators too. So again, sparing no expense. And then ultimately, she ended up passing away. So whether she was in constant communication with these ghosts, let's say in a nice way, or maybe something else, like in terms of a more sinister way, either way though, when she ended up passing in 1922, she, interestingly enough, left everything, all of her possessions, everything that she had, to her niece and to her personal secretary. But get this, this was again some of the new information I found out. Because this house was so ill-conceived, no one else would buy it. Like, it was actually considered worthless at the time. There was nobody that was even interested in doing so. And so as it turns out, it was sold for a very, very slow amount of money. At least even back then, like a little over 135,000. And then afterward, the very large acreage, 100 plus, was just piecemealed here and there until it just became 4 acres. But eventually, 2 people, in other words, bought it, and they became an investment company. They ended up opening it, and then they became a tour attraction. And then, of course, afterwards, stories about the ghosts and the hauntings added even more there. In fact, let's talk about that here right now. To this day, people that go there can still apparently hear or even see some of the ghosts associated with these houses. If these are the ghosts that are the dangerous ones, who knows? Maybe there's some of the nicer ones that were there as well, advising Miss Winchester on what to do. But yes, these ghosts still roam that hallways. They still roam the rooms. People can see them. People can hear them. They can also feel them as well. There's knocks. There's mysterious cold spots too. There's the sensations that you're being watched. Tour guides are always stating that they have these interactions with these ghosts. Apparently, Miss Winchester herself has been seen going around that location too, which makes sense too, because this was again a home that she practically spent the rest of her life in afterward. And so all these ghosts manage and roam this household well after Miss Winchester's death. And if you go visit it to this day for a tour, then apparently you'll have a good chance to do so. I think there was a short time period where the house was closed for tours. Someone might need to correct me on that. But yes, once it was reopened, that's where more stuff was discovered. This was some of the new stuff again that I was mentioning earlier. There was a secret attic that was apparently never there before. Somebody, I guess, ended up discovering it. Once again, a surprise from Sarah Winchester herself. And then afterward, under a new tour option, that's where more rooms that were normally left off from the previous tours are there to this day. So people can now go see those rooms for the first time and get to see how things looked unfinished. So in other words, there's obviously the more well-known rooms that look beautiful and they just look amazing, like in terms of their style and their finished attires. But no, in this case, these are the older rooms, like the more hidden ones, and you get to see an idea of how that looks like there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all the information associated with the mysterious Winchester house. Anybody been there before? Anybody happen to take one of those tours? Maybe walk around it? How amazing would that be? It's definitely on my bucket list to be able to do so. Just to be able to experience it in person. It has been chronicled on a lot of TV shows, Ghost Adventures being one of them, some of the other ghost shows as well. People have toured them in the past and continue to tour them today. So if anybody has a more local experience, I'd definitely love to be able to see what that experience is for you, and then being able to see those comments related to it. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.